Yo, what is up guys, Grim here, and in today's video we're going to be talking everything to do with speed and doing a deep dive into how good it is, as well as its pros, its cons, and most importantly, how much of it you should get on your characters, if at all. Now before we get into this video though, I'm going to assume you guys have a basic understanding of what this number here is. This is the action value of the characters. If you don't know what that number is, go watch the linked video down below and skip to the speed section. It's a video I did which is explaining the basics of combat. You guys can check that out for a basic understanding. So those of you who are still here or are just coming back, we have a pretty good understanding that this value here, the action value, is essentially what the game creates based off of your speed value, and it updates every single time anything in the game happens. The lower this number is, the better, and overall that's what speed does. The more speed you have, the lower your action value is going to be every single time you move, which is what we're looking for here. So the question is, how much speed is good and how low should you make your action value, and is it any good compared to other stats like attack and, crit and all sorts of stuff like that? Because there's a pretty high opportunity cost in this game. You make sure you want those gear pieces to count. Well, let's see whether or not speed is going to help you in your endeavors in combat. Alright, for those of you guys who want the TLDR and want to know the values and get in and out, let me get into it. So in a 6-cycle fight in the Memory of Chaos, 134 speed is going to net you no worse than 33% more actions regardless of the cycle. But in the best case scenario, it's going to net you double actions on cycle 0. If you want to go for even more speed though, you can go for 161 speed on your characters, which will net you no worse than 60% more actions in a 6-cycle fight, and at best double actions on cycle 0. Now if you have a character with additional speed modifiers, this changes the numbers, but if a character has no speed modifiers, those are the numbers you're looking for. Alright, so I'm of course going to give you guys the lowdown on exactly how I came to those numbers and how you can come to your own conclusions as well using a special table which I cooked up with one of my friends. First and foremost, I want to explain to you guys everything you need to know about the pros and cons of speed. The first thing we want to talk about here is going to be the skill point economy and how speed impacts it. So there's two roles in Star Rail. There's damage dealers and there are supports. Damage dealers love to consume skill points as they can turn any skill point you have on your team into raw damage. Now those skill points don't grow on trees though, someone needs to build them, and that is generally the job of supports. Supports do like to situationally use their skill, but generally they're going to be basic attacking a good amount of the time. So we got stuff like debuffers, healers, like the harmony characters. They're going to be basic attacking, a good chunk of the time in order to fuel your main damage dealer who wants to use their skill as much as possible, but also the rest of the team so you can use a bit of utility. So some heals, some taunts, and some buffs. And that is going to be the equation. Now, if you add speed to either side of that, you're going to end up with some pretty interesting results. So let's say that you are perfectly balanced. You had enough points to fuel your damaging character. He was able to use he or her was able to use their skill every single turn, and your healer was able to heal when they needed, and all your supports were doing fine. They were able to use their skill when they needed. You were at an equal. It was like perfect parity. Well, if you gave your supports speed, you would end up with a ton more skill points, and that would be great. You could use more like taunts, you could use more buffs, you can heal way more, and your character who is dealing the damage, they wouldn't have a problem either. So there's not really any downside to supports getting speed. It's just going to be better. More skill points, more potential damage, more potential buffs, more potential healing. So supports, it's basically a no-brainer. Everything in the game supports getting speed. That is what you want, and that's going to be really good. But let's reverse that. Back to the initial parity situation. Okay, everyone's got enough skill points. Let's say that we increase the damaging character's speed now, like by a lot. Well, if you were just maintaining the status quo there, and you increase the damage dealer's speed, well, now suddenly they're going to be doing more attacks, they're going to need more skill points, and you don't have any to spare. So what are they going to have to do? They're going to have to start using basic attacks. And basic attacks aren't too impressive in terms of the damage numbers. I'm sure we've all experienced that. So that's not ideal. You're basically wasting those extra actions that you invested all your stats into, which definitely sucks. So you don't want to make your carry way too fast, and in some cases you can actually ruin your carry entirely. Like a character like Yanqing has to use his skill every turn, and if you make him too fast, he's not going to be able to do that, and he's going to ruin his whole entire rotation, which would be a big bad thing. So the ideal scenario is that you would be able to speed up your main carry because, more actions is better, but you'd also have to speed up your entire team as well. And overall, it's better to make sure that your supports are a little bit faster or a lot faster than your main damaging character to make sure that the bad scenario never happens. So the conclusion from that part is, okay, basically on all supports, build speed pretty much unconditionally. It's always just going to be good on them. But on the damaging characters, ooh, it's a little bit touch and go. It's a bit of a tough call. Now, there may be some niche characters here like Jeopard and Clara who may not want speed. For the most part, it's just going to be deciding whether or not your damaging characters want the speed or not. And that really is going to come down to how fast they already are and how many skill points your team is already generating. Alright, the next thing you guys want to consider with speed is going to be buffs and debuffs. So this is a double-edged sword. So buffs like Jeopard's shield, Trailblazer Fire's shield, Bailu's invigoration, and like buffs like Bronya's ultimate, all sorts of stuff like that. Every buff in the game is based off of how many actions you perform. And speed is going to allow you to perform more actions. But if you're doing more actions, well then you're having a less concentrated kind of effort. So let's say you had a damaging character that had 5 actions and you buffed up those 5 actions exclusively. And let's say you gave it so much speed that it went up to 10 actions, but you still only had 5 buffed turns. Well, you'd be losing value there because you don't have as many buffs. And let's paint another scenario. Let's say that you have a character and they have 5 actions again. And for those 5 actions, you can confidently shield them with 5 turns of shields. But then let's give them speed. Well, now they have 10 turns and only half of those are going to be shielded because you went so fast that the shield ran out on you. So speed can have a bit of a downside there. And these scenarios are pretty exaggerated. If you build speed on the supports that grant those buffs and those shields, it's basically just going to be a similar situation. But overall, speed has a lot more impacts than I think a lot of people realize. Now, one thing to note about speed is if you are debuffing the enemy to gain benefits like lowering their attack or increasing the damage they take, your speed is completely irrelevant in that case because it's based on how fast the enemy is, not you. However, let's switch it around. Let's take a look at debuffs. So we've talked about buffs. Let's talk about debuffs. So let's say you get frozen, imprisoned, or entangled, or some other crazy debuff. Well, speed is actually going to allow you to get out of that much, much faster because it will become your turn faster. So when you're frozen, it's based on how fast your turn is going to be. So you're frozen by a percentage of your action value. So it's just going to be a much easier time to get out of crowd controls, which is a really big deal. It's also going to allow dots to wear off you faster, which means they may not stack and reapply to you. This is very, very relevant for enemies that apply stacking buffs of wind shear, bleed, and burn. Being able to be fast enough to let the first stack wear off and then not be reapplied in a mega stack is a big, big deal. Alright, so based on that information, is speed good or bad for buffs and debuffs? Well, it's definitely very good if you're debuffed because the debuffs wear off faster. Now, if you're buffed, if you increase everybody's speed, well, it's not going to be a really big problem because you're increasing the entire tempo of your team at once, and the buffs that you have on you are basically going to last for the same amount of time they would otherwise. If you, for example, though, had 3 members on your team really, really fast, but a super duper slow Jeopard, well, that wouldn't be very good because the shields would end up wearing off faster than you could reapply them. But by a similar token, if you had 3 very slow team members, but are basically super speedy, like Jeopard, who is basically a Ferrari, you'd be able to apply shields faster than they could ever wear off on your team members. So it's a bit of a balancing act, similar to what we talked about first. It depends on how fast you want to make everyone. But for the most part, making Jeopard super duper fast in that example is just going to allow him to apply shields more consistently over the course of a fight, so it's never going to be a bad thing. The only situation where it would be bad is if you had a character like Yanqing who absolutely needs a ton of shields, and your Jeopard was too slow to keep those shields on him when he needed them most because Yanqing is outrunning the shield duration. So overall, conclusion is speed is pretty good as well for buff and debuff management if you're careful with what you're doing. The next point here is just a straight W. So being faster means you are moving faster compared to the enemy, and many enemies have these big charged up attacks that they do, and those don't really change. They're going to be there, you're going to have to deal with them, but being faster than the enemy and maybe getting to act an extra time before they do that big charged up attack will give you twice the opportunity to break them with your team. Essentially meaning you could definitely tip the scales in your favor by being able to freeze or break or do any sort of things to that enemy. So let me paint you a picture. There is a fire golem and he is about to go berserk and do a big firestorm on you. Now your entire team gets to move 1 time and you just can't break him. But let's say that one of your characters has a bit of extra speed and gets to move twice before that fire golem moves. Now you have enough speed to break that golem and the entire fight and the course of everything changes. And what was a really hard fight and basically impossible because he has to tank a big firestorm is now completely trivial because the golem gets broken and it's GG. Speed is absolutely going to enable you to be in those situations, and as someone who's done Memory of Chaos 10, I can say that it makes it way, way easier to have fast characters. There is so many enemies which which you need to break, otherwise you will be taking so much damage that it really does help you out a ton. And when considering speed, definitely consider the defensive options of being able to break enemies as well. Okay, so that all sounds great, but I'm not getting this speed for free, man. Where is this speed coming from? And, how hard is it to get? And what am I giving up? Well, first and foremost, speed can only really come from boots as well as substats. And some light cones on traces also do have it, but those are few and far between. So we'll focus on the boots and the substats. And unfortunately, it's a pretty rare stat. To get it as a main stat on the boots, it's definitely not common. And on substats, it's just as rare. So it's not something you're gonna be able to get easily, but in the long term, it is something you will end up with eventually. Now, how good is this? What is the opportunity cost? Well, on the boots, on most characters, you're going to be giving up either attack, HP, or defense, one of those three. And how much and how important that is going to depend on the character as well as how you like to play. But for the most part, speed on supports is basically a W. You really can't go wrong with it. Build it on all the supports. Maybe there's some scenarios in which you might not want it on some tank related characters, but for the most part, it's a pretty big W on everyone else. But on the damaging characters, that's where it becomes a bit of a discussion. And honestly, I'm not going to tell you to build speed or attack in this video. I'm just going to show you guys what I found, and you guys can make that decision yourself. Same goes for substats. You'll be giving up stuff like crit damage as well as attack. If you decide to go for speed on those substats as well, you guys are going to have to make that own decision yourself. But for me personally, I am going to be building speed. Let me get into the specifics of why I think it's so good and why I'm taking it over damage dealing then. Alright, so for the rest of this video, we're going to be talking about speed in the context of Memory of Chaos, as that's pretty much the only place where you really need to do any sort of this kind of level of min-maxing. For the rest of the game, you can basically run any units with any gear and you're going to have a blast, you're going to smash through it, it's going to be great. But when it comes to Memory of Chaos, it's time to kind of suit up and get some pretty good gear on and try and start figuring out the end game and kind of how it works. So that's what we're going to be talking about in this video. So in Memory of Chaos, there is a concept called a cycle. A cycle is essentially a turn from other turn-based games, and it lasts a set amount of in-game kind of value. And that value is action value. Now, the first cycle in every Memory of Chaos run, and Forgotten Hall for that matter, will last 150 action points. Now, overall, if you don't fully understand what action value is and all sorts of stuff like that, to give you guys a bit of an introduction, one character with 100 speed will have 100 action value, meaning they get to move once in the first cycle of Forgotten Hall, because 150 action is how long that is, and 100 only fits in that once. Now, if there was a character that in theory had an action value of 75 fits into 150 twice. And that is what I want to show you guys. So my Ting Yun has 145 speed. Now, the way that you can calculate this is by pulling out a calculator. You can go ahead and take the number 10,000 and you can go ahead and divide that by your speed. So it would be an action value of 68.9. So the question for you guys is, does that fit into 150? So 150 divided by 69, nice. It actually does. So I get to do two actions, and you can see that right here. Look at that. My Ting Yun gets to move twice. That's badass, man. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. And you can see I get another action because I am in the window of 150. That's pretty cool. All right, next up, my Yang Ching. How much speed's he got? He's got 140, I believe. So let's see if he fits in the 150. Spoilers, you should already see he does. But, okay, 10,000. 10,000 divided by 140. Okay, 71 and times 2. Does that fit in there? It does. It fits. And you can see he gets two actions. So why is this relevant? Well, the reason this is relevant is you're essentially moving twice as much as the enemy in the first cycle. But you're probably saying, okay, well, that doesn't matter because in the next cycle, they're just going to get the action value that they had last time. Well, let's go to the next part here. I'm going to show you guys what happens when you kill a wave of enemies in the Memory of Chaos. Something very special happens. Alright, so the next thing I want to show you guys is wave-based combat in Memory of Chaos. So we've already decided that the first wave has, or the first cycle has 150 action points in it. We know that. We can see that Ting Yun, who has exactly the speed that we're looking for, which is 145 speed, in this case 112 plus 33, that's 145. We already did the math on that. We get that she gets 2 turns here. But 150 isn't the normal cycle kind of length for Memory of Chaos. It's actually 100. The first cycle cycle of every wave is actually special. They make it extra long for some reason. And every cycle after the initial 150 only lasts for 100. And what I'm going to do is I want to show you guys that. It's going to take a second, but it's going to be worth it so you guys can understand what's going to come next here. So my Yangqing and my Tingyun, they have both gone here. That's just great. We're all happy with that. I want to show you guys though that I'm not going to get another double action next wave because it's only 100 action points long, and that's really going to drive home what I want to show you guys here coming up. So you'll notice here, we're getting up to Tingyun here in a second here. And because it's only 100 action points long, oh man, I'm not going to get the second action here. So again, to reiterate, first one is 150, and then it goes 100, 100, 100, 100, 100. Now, there is something very important here that I want to show you guys, and I'm going to show you guys in real time so you guys can see exactly what it looks like. So now we understand it goes 150, 100, 100, 100. But what if I told you there was actually a time in which it goes back to 150? And that time is after all the enemies die. Whenever you clear a wave in Memory of Chaos, the subsequent turn is going to reset all of the turn order and completely redo it all, and that is going to be a big deal because it's going to take you back to that initial 150 big window. And I'm going to show you guys that in real time. You guys can see it. You don't have to question it. You've just seen it for yourself, so you don't even have to go test it yourself. You can just see that it's happening in front of you. It might take a second here, but it's going to save you guys in the long run here. Okay, so we're going to use the Yangqing ultimate here. I'm pretty sure it's going to kill it. So take note of the turn order here. So right now it's Yangqing, Natasha, Japad, as well as Tingyun. So hopefully it's actually kills it so I can show you guys. Oh, yeah, okay, there we go. All right, check this out. All right, so the turn order has actually changed. It has reset to its initial turn order, the way it was set up. It's taken everybody, it's reshuffled them back to the beginning, and this is how it did start out. You can go even check the footage. It's identical. So whenever you get a new wave, you're essentially starting a new battle, and you're back to that 150 window. Of course, all subsequent waves after this will still be 100, but we have the exact turn order that we did before. Why is this relevant? Well, all of the speed tuning that we did, all the speed tuning we will do in a second here, it will actually be relevant multiple times per fight. So if you perfectly lined up your Bronya for the very first turn and you were like, oh man, it's gonna be so good, and you executed it, and then for the rest of the fight you were thinking, oh man, I'm not gonna get that to happen again. Well, you're actually wrong. If you speed tune everything right, you actually get that generally 2, but most of the time 3 times per fight. You'll get it on turn 1 when you enter the battle. You'll get it after you kill the first wave, and then you'll get it after you kill the second wave. So you actually get that perfect speed scenario multiple times per fight. And we're going to get into why that's especially relevant here in a second here, but you guys have seen it now. My Tingyun is getting 2 actions here. Everything was being reset. My Yangqing is now getting 2 actions, and we are on our merry way. Next, let's get into the min-max portion of this. Alright, so to understand why we're min-maxing, first we need to understand what we're doing it for. And what we're doing it for here is Memory of Chaos, but more specifically, completing Memory of Chaos in the shortest amount of cycles possible. This is Memory of Chaos 10, and in order to get 2 more gold stars here and achieve the 3 stars that I need, I would have to defeat Memory of Chaos 10 in 20 cycles total. Now, the Memory of Chaos 10 encounters have 2 sides. There is the first side, which contains robots. There is 1 enemy with 3 different waves to it. There is also Kokolia on this side, who contains 1 enemy as well as 3 waves to it. Now, in order to beat all those waves in 20 cycles, you could kind of cut it up and cut the fights up into a set amount of cycles. So if we say that the first wave of each side is the easiest, we can allocate 2 cycles to each of those waves. And then we can say that the next waves are kind of a lot harder. We can just allocate 4 cycles each to those waves. So it would be 2, 4, and then 4. And that would be 10 cycles per side and 20 cycles total, and I would be able to get my 3 stars that I was after. So how can we use speed to really capitalize on that and really take advantage of that and make sure that we're getting as many actions and as many potential breaks and all sorts of stuff like that in those cycles as possible? Well, let me give you guys all the breakpoints and the info. Alright, so here's a speed chart which I made with my friend, as I mentioned earlier, which is going to give you the exact speed breakpoints for every single cycle that we might want to consider. So earlier we talked about using 2 cycles and 4 cycles. Let's talk about those things first. So let's understand exactly what's on the table here. So if we wanted to get 2 actions in cycle 0, if we take a look at our chart here, we can see some pretty interesting things. So first and foremost, up here we have the amount of cycles that are going to be in your fight. And you can kind of read that off here and understand it. And then accompanying that, we see the action value associated with those cycles down below. So we know that the first cycle, the cycle 0, lasts for 150 action points. And then the next one's 250, 350, 450, etc. And now we want to understand how much speed you'd need to gain 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, even more actions in that cycle. So in order to gain 1 action in cycle 0, which would mean you'd be able to move once per 150 action value, you'd need only 67 speed, which is not much, and pretty much every character has that by default. But if you wanted to move twice in a cycle 0 and get double actions in the first cycle, you'd need 134 speed. But why would you want that? Why would you want to do that? Why would you want to move twice in cycle 0 if we're talking about 2, 4, etc.? Well, let me paint you guys a picture. Let's say that you had a character like Sele, and she was able to get a kill on the first cycle, cycle 0. She was able to take out 2 enemies, and there was 2 enemies remaining. Well, if she had 1 extra action in that cycle 0, she could take out the remaining 2 enemies, and then you'd go straight into the next cycle because you killed the wave, and it would reset back to the 150, and you would have used 0 cycles. So the difference between getting 1 action and 2 actions in cycle 0 is tremendous. And that goes for all actions in all cycles as well. More actions is better, and it's not just more damage, it's more potential to just do stuff. More potential for plays, more potential for game making, and all sorts of stuff like that. It's never going to be as strong though as in cycle 0, because getting a 0 cycle on something just gives you so much more time in the other waves, and potentially even the other side, that it really does make it very, very easy. In addition to that, characters like Sele really like to take advantage of that, and spoilers, it's part of the reason she's so good, and she will continue to be so good. So we understand now why you'd want a 0 cycle fight, and we also understand the breakpoint that is associated with that, and why I recommended the 134 speed at the very start. You're going from getting 1 action to 2 actions in that first cycle, and remember, you get that first cycle multiple times per fight. So in the first very time you enter the fight, you get that double action, and then after you clear the first wave, double action, after you clear the second wave, double action. Now, what about the rest of the cycles though? What kind of actions can you get from speed? So we understand 134 speed is really, really good at the start. You're going to get that double movement, you're going to get all the tempo, you're going to be looking pretty good. 134 speed is going to net you 1 extra action on cycle 1 as well, 1 extra action on cycle 2, so you're not really gaining too much so far, but then when you get to cycle 3, you get another bonus action. So far you've gotten 1 extra action, through cycle 0, 1, and 2, but now in cycle 3, you've netted 2 bonus actions for your 134 speed, which, okay, now we're cooking. Now, if the fight ever drags out long enough, you can see here that on cycle 6, of the fight, which is, it's going to say like 5 down. So it would be like, if you had 40 cycles, it would say 35. You would have an extra 3 actions. So now you're getting 3 actions. Well, let's actually kind of boil that down and truly understand how many extra actions really is that. So on cycle 0, for having 134 speed, you're getting 100% more actions. On cycle 1, you're getting 50% more actions. Cycle 2, you're getting 33% more actions. On cycle 3, it goes back up to getting 50% more actions. Cycle 4, you're getting 40% more. And then cycle 5, you're getting 33% more. And then finally on cycle 6, you're getting 42% more actions. So it's never worse than 33% more actions at any point during a 6 cycle fight. And at the very start, 134 speeds netting you double actions. That's a big deal. And overall, it's going to be strongest to have that 134 speed at the very start of a battle in cycle 0 and cycle 1. And then also as the battle kind of drags out, it does kind of spike back up at cycle 6 as well as cycle 3, which is kind of what you're looking for there. So those are the breakpoints for that. Well, what if you wanted to go even faster though? Well, it's going to be pretty damn hard to get a triple action in cycle 0. Unless your name is literally Sele, you're not doing it. It's 201 speed to get a triple action in cycle 0, but it is doable in cycle 1. You can get 4 actions instead of 3 or 2. So we're already getting 1 bonus action from our 121 speed, but you can get another bonus one on cycle 1 just by getting 161 speed. I say just, that's actually pretty damn hard to get, but overall you can get it. And it is something that you could acquire. And that would give you a total of double actions on cycle 1 as well. And this is now a massive tempo swing, because we were talking about lower cycle limits earlier. That's going to be a pretty big deal. And you also are going to pick up an extra action as well, multiple extra actions on cycle 6 as well. So it doesn't scale half bad either as the fight goes along, which is why I mentioned that it would be at worst 60% more actions to have 161 speed, and at best double actions on cycle 0. So you kind of have 2 breakpoints to pick there. You guys can pick out and choose some more breakpoints here if you want. And if you're in the future and you can achieve like 300 speed, you know, damn, that sounds like a lot of fun. If you're using Asta, if you're using other speed buffs, there could be stuff on the table here as well. You guys have the speed chart here. I might even link it down below so you guys can grab a copy of it as well. I'll make a new spreadsheet for it and you guys can yoink it and, you know, have some fun with it as well. But overall, hopefully this gives you guys a little bit more of a bit of information about speed. Basically, the main thing here you guys need to know is that there's specific breakpoints. Best ones, at least from what I can see, are 134 and 161. And anything over or under that is kind of a little bit wasted unless you're trying to hit another breakpoint. So it's something that you need an exact amount or close, but it's so valuable that going a little bit over just to hit a breakpoint is just fine. But I think that speed is pretty damn strong. Of course, you guys are going to have to decide whether or not it's worth it for you. But if you did learn something new and you want to know more about mechanics like this, definitely subscribe to the channel for more. Plenty of content on the way. And if you learned something new and like something in this video specifically, make sure to give it a big thumbs up. That would really help me out as well. Until next time, hope you guys have enjoyed. Cheers.